Okay, so today what I want to show you is we had a pretty good windstorm come through here. This is my garden plot, by the way, one of them. I got carrots growing there, and they're getting sparse only because we picked a lot. And then I've got right through the middle, you can see I've got some garlic growing. And then on the outside of the garlic, you'll see that I have rows of two different types of kale, which have been very productive. And then inside of that, which is a little hard to see, I've got tomato cages, which my intention is to bring my cucumbers up the tomato cages and try and get them to grow vertically to take less space. And behind that is a row of dill, which, as you can see, I had a pretty good windstorm. I'm going to walk through my path here, hopefully not confuse you all too much or move the camera around a lot. So, a pretty good windstorm came through and kind of laid all my dill down, which is really shading out my cucumbers. Which I wanted to shade them somewhat from the afternoon sun, but not this much. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut all that down. I did want to show you all this though. And this is what's called companion planting. All of these plants are supposed to get along very well with each other. And then on the outside of that, I have my tomatoes. Now that's a small one that got planted a little later. I believe that one's I'm not sure which type of tomato that is. Some were volunteer, some were just taken from tomatoes that we got from the store, and then some were purchased plants, including some seeds that were for the cherry tomatoes. And then on the outside of that, you can see right here, this is basil. Basil there, some more basil there, and then a little more basil. For some reason, my basil did not want to come up as well. But I do have a ton of the lemon basil, which is this one right here. That lemon basil smells so good. Oh, and you can see I'm getting a few cherry tomatoes just now starting to ripen up. All right. Now it is the 4th of June today. All right. So this right here is a tomatillo plant, which is great for green salsa. Hopefully we'll have some results on that to show you later. And then you can see I've got a few tomatoes growing up in there. Some pretty good sized ones, a little more basil, another late planted tomato plant. And then of course you can see I've got some pretty good tomatoes growing here on this plant here. Several really nice sized tomatoes. Now these seeds were taken from an heirloom tomato that I bought at a grocery store here locally. And then of course along the sides I have planted marigolds on the outside edges to try and keep the bugs down somewhat. And then I got some of the bee balm over here. And this here, this is incredible. Now the big leaves you see are actually squash. Now the squash I planted, and you can see I've got some squash coming in here and there. But these watermelons, which there's one there. Let's see here. There's another one right there. Let's see. I got several. Another one over there. Bigger one there. One growing on the outside here. And you see all of the smaller, more variegated leaves. Let me show you. I guess I can show you. These leaves here are all the watermelon leaves. These leaves are the squash leaves. Now I planted the squash, but all of this watermelon is volunteer. All right, and I think at last count I had 10 different watermelons in here. There's even a big fat one up underneath the corn. And then if you look at the corn, you look very carefully, you can see that I have a tomato plant that's growing up in here. And again, that was a volunteer that came up. What had happened, I used this garden patch basically as my mulch pit. I was trying to raise the level of the soil a little bit So grass clippings, garden waste, and all of my food scraps from the kitchen all went in here. And this thing is going crazy. Now, I had talked before about my experiment with the wireworms. So I had planted beans, which are doing quite well, you can see, despite the fact that the bases are being shaded out essentially by the squash and the watermelon. But they're doing very well. Alright, and the idea was, because I had potatoes planted in here, was to try and get rid of the wireworms. And then between those, you'll see I have some radishes growing, which are from my own seed from last year. And then I had planted a few spinach plants. Man, none of the spinach want to come up. There's one right there. Gosh, I don't know if there's any others. Oh, I guess there's one right here. Just barely see it. Right there. So, hang on. Yeah, right in there. This one right here is a spinach plant. But I don't know if it's just too hot for spinach, which I did plant it late. Or if all the rain we got, because it's rained for almost 2 solid weeks, kind of killed it off. Everything else is doing quite well. Over here, you'll see my strawberries are getting tall, but the dang squirrels are eating them all. Hang on one second while this airplane goes by. So while the strawberries are doing well, you can see I got a couple little strawberries still growing, but we're competing with the squirrels for strawberries right now. This over here is my jalapeno plant. We have harvested, I don't know, 10, 15 jalapenos off it already. You can still see there's some more coming. Little baby ones here and there. Then over here, I've got a little bit of stevia, one there and one there, which we propagated by basically cutting it and letting it root out. And then over here, well, there's my onion patch, which is going great guns. I got some new bulb onions growing behind. You can see the smaller ones back here, right in there, along that row. I've also got a ton of volunteer onions from where the seed heads basically have fallen off. You can see them down in there. It looks kind of like grass right now. We'll see how much of that comes up. But that's from my last year's batch of onions. You can see the seed heads there. And then over here, I got a little bit of lemongrass growing. And then this is my Swiss chard, which is not doing well. I haven't really got much of any chard, mostly because of the bugs. Now, I showed a video before about my homemade recipe for bug repellent, which, as I said before, I'm not using any chemicals on this garden, if at all possible. So I've sprayed that again. Couldn't really spray it over the last week or two because it's been raining so much. So we'll see how that does. Hoping I get some chard, because that's some really tasty stuff. If you love spinach, you'll love chard. And then more radishes growing back there and along this row. That is some volunteer, I believe they are bell peppers. And over on this side, you can see I've got my lettuce that has gone crazy. And you're saying, why don't you just chop that down? Well, I'm trying to let it seed. I want it to seed out, drop seeds all over the place, and have a bunch of volunteer lettuce next year. And then, of course, in between that, I've got my cabbage, which I've already harvested one big cabbage. I got a couple others. And this is my companion planting, which I noticed that my leaves were starting to turn yellow on the beans and the squash. So what I did is I took what little bit of finished compost I had and just composted the heck out of this in between the corn, and it seems as though they've greened up a bit. I don't know if it was just too much water or if there's not enough nutrients, but they are growing. And in fact, over on this side, though, I never got the beans. Well, I got one bean plant to grow. This one right there, that little baby right there. Well, hang on, let's see if you can see it. I planted beans in this row 3 times and only got one. I'm not sure why. But we're going to keep working on the soil and keep improving it. But I do have a couple of squash, and in fact, I've got one spaghetti squash that's actually pretty sizable. looking good right there. That's the only one so far that's gotten of any size, though I got some smaller ones growing back in there. Alright, and then let me show you over here. Now this was a volunteer tomato plant that came up in my mulch pit of a garden that I showed you earlier, and I transplanted it, thinking, yeah, whatever, it's probably not going to grow. But man, look at all the tomatoes that have come up. This thing is going crazy with tomatoes, so it's producing well. And then behind that, you see my peas. On the other side of that is where I tried to do a companion planting with spinach and beans. The spinach never came up. Beans are doing well. Some more pepper plants there. And then my beets, which are getting ready to be harvested. Some more beans through here. Pinto beans, so I'm letting them dry out on the vine. And then, of course, I've got some peppers. Those are hot peppers there. And these are sweet peppers along this row. And they're just really starting to grow up nice and get pretty good size. So we'll see how those all do. But that pretty much is my garden, as far as my bed garden anyway. Squirrels have been a problem, particularly with my sunflowers. Man, they went crazy on my sunflowers. So I have officially declared war on squirrels. If you've got any ideas or suggestions on how to keep squirrels out of your garden, please let me know, because they tore up my sunflowers. Man, as soon as the heads get big enough to have seeds, they've been munching them down. So let me know if you got some ideas. Other than that, that's pretty much the status on my main garden. If you got any suggestions, please leave them as a comment, like, subscribe. Let us know what you think. Share with your friends, and most importantly, grow something. Thanks for stopping by.